Let's talk about the fourth subtype for ENTJs. We've talked about the dominant, the creative, the normalizing. Now, the fourth and final subtype for ENTJs is the harmonizing subtype. What are the characteristics and careers of this style of ENTJ?
So this is probably the least stereotypical version of an ENTJ in our mind. Like we can maybe make a little bit of space for the creative. That's going to feel weird. We're going to think that they're ENTPs or ENFPs. The dominant, we're going to, it's like that's our stereotype. The normalizing, we're going to go, oh, that person's an ESTJ or maybe has SJ preferences. But this is a subtype that might actually mistype as maybe an ISFP even or a INFP.
Yeah.
This is a very different style of ENTJ. Now, as we've gone through all of these episodes, we mentioned that the harmonizing subtype, not always, but the harmonizing subtype tends to be associated with age. Like the older you get, the more likely you are to explore this part of who you are. So this is a more seasoned, usually, not always, but a more seasoned, mature, maybe even international style of an ENTJ. Some of their characteristics is that they're eccentric, even mystical, highly observant of what's going on, and they can act as superb consultants and counselors. They restructure and rebuild people, which is a very interesting way of looking at it. I actually, I mentioned ISFP or INFP, but actually I bet these are the ENTJs that mistype as INFJs. I bet that's also very common. They usually have a very distinct mode of thinking and acting, meaning each individual one has a very distinctive way of moving through the world that is particular to them as an individual. So it's hard to say the specific skills they've built along the way or picked up along the way because it's very peculiar to that individual. But they usually are refined in the way they think. They've been tweaking their style of thinking and sort of making improvements on themselves for years, if not decades. So whatever it is that they're good at, they're very good at. And so there's a almost uncanny intuitive power that ends up following them. They're usually very tapped into their intuition. Again, this might be one of the reasons why they can mistype as INFJs, maybe INTJs as well. They have not great executive capacity, kind of like the creative subtype we mentioned before, in comparison with other ENTJs. They're still going to be ENTJs. It's going to be better than other types, but compared to the other subtypes, it's not as good executive functioning. And they don't have the ability to really act as society expects them to act. So they're very iconoclastic. They're kind of weird, right? Like I mentioned before, eccentric ENTJs. And that's not uncommon for harmonizing subtypes. This is a very common pattern for harmonizing subtypes. You just be a little off and a little kind of, not off, but like...
according to society standards.
Yeah, like 1 degree of separation from how everybody expects people to show up and behave.
Yeah.
But again, they're really good with tapping into individuals. They can analyze an individual, group, or situation to instantly understand what is secretly out of whack, which I think is really interesting. They're looking for all the things that are like off, right? What's out of alignment with this group of people or with this individual? That's what they're tracking for. And once they hone in on that, they almost work like a conductor to get that back into alignment. And so you could see this maybe even physically with an ENTJ that is a chiropractor, right? Like that's the physical body manifestation of it, which is like, oh, you're out of alignment. Let me figure that out and readjust you. But it's that concept taken to almost everything that they do.
Yeah.
Right?
We have multiple coaches that are in our profiler training program, learning how to do personality profiling to weave it in their coaching practice, who are ENTJs. And I would say, I bet a lot of the ENTJs that are inside the profiler training program are this style of harmonizing.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at people systems and they're looking at the person, almost as like the person was a company to go into and like ameliorate and make better. They're looking at that person like from a resource way, like I'm going to help you with your inner resources.
Yeah.
Your perspectives, all of this. This is a very attunement to the person and what's going on for them.
Yep, exactly. So some of the careers that they enter into are healing arts. It's not uncommon for ENTJs to end up as healers. Different styles of education, like alternative education in particular. They could even be a hypnotist or a shaman, right? This is the kind of style that they're looking at. And I would say when you get specific with their careers, they're usually okay with going outside the mainstream to seek education that is considered maybe like an ancient practice or something that is more aligned with, like disparate cultural traditions all brought together to make something new. And
we
things
got approached by an ENTJ a few years ago to possibly come to South America or Central America to do an ayahuasca trip at their facility. He had made like millions in the tech industry and had started this commune, or not commune, but like this retreat center to take people on plant medicine experiences. And they wanted to come and bring our podcasting equipment and do like an expose. It didn't work out, but come and basically record on site at our experience and show that. And I think this person, the person that started it all, was probably an ENTJ, had ENTJ preferences. Probably this, maybe not started out as a harmonizer, but leaned here over maturation of his career in life.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that person started as a dominant, but eventually found themselves as a harmonizing. And yes, like leading psychonaut experiences, like that ayahuasca concept.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And building a whole retreat center around allowing people to have these experiences. That's a great example of what a harmonizing ENTJ might look like. But they also might be a person who's like a Reiki practitioner or an acupuncturist, or as I mentioned before, somebody who does alignments and adjustments, as a chiropractor.
Yeah.
They could also be like a body-centered psychotherapist, right? They do, trauma release, and they focus in on the body to do so.
Yeah.
They could also be a life coach, right? A motivational speaker, a counselor, as I mentioned, alternative education practitioner. So these are the ENTJs that are not afraid of anything that looks a little woo-woo to the outside world. They're the ones who are like full throttle into it. And because of that, they get really good at what they do. They're very, very good at making these adjustments. In fact, Dario mentions they can almost achieve miraculous results. And I think it's that combination of ambition and that capacity to sort of problem solve, but bringing in all of these, other pieces of information that others might, sort of disregard. They're able to almost look like wizards in their specific area of expertise.
Let's go a layer deeper for type geeks. Warning label, type geeks, warning label. Let's talk about the neurotransmitter. Estrogen is the preferred neurotransmitter for harmonizing subtypes, all of them, and particularly ENTJ. The two cognitive functions, effectiveness and perspectives, extroverted thinking and introverted intuition. What are the attunements of these two functions for this subtype?
So this is the opposite of the dominant. And so therefore both their judging and perceiving function have a holistic preference. So both extroverted thinking or effectiveness and introverted intuition or perspectives are going to be more open framed, more receptive, seeing a bigger picture, more diffused energy. But at the same time, they're also getting things done because they're ENTJs. One of my favorite ways of describing them is that Dario mentions that they can be easily mistaken for some other type, right? That's very common for this kind of ENTJ to believe they're a different personality type. But one should not mistake their rapport building and aligning skills with anything less than a pragmatic power, hopefully to help others.
Yeah.
And so it's a holistic, harmonizing, diffused version, but there's still that pragmatic power in there. And that's what makes it so that they're not just, like you could see this like as the soft, cuddly ENTJ, but I don't think this is the soft, cuddly ENTJ. This is an ENTJ that has applied their cognition to solving human challenges that are locked inside the individual. And so they might be warm and friendly, but they're there to get a job done. And when I like the metaphor, the analogy of the chiropractor. It's like they might be super friendly, and then they get you on the table, and they're like they're moving your body all over the different ways and cracking it, and like it kind of sounds scary sometimes. You're like, everything all right? And then afterwards, you're sort of sore, but it feels good, and you're happy that it happened. Think of an ENTJ that is bringing that kind of energy to everything.